This video is for those who have done the work and are doing the work. What is the work? Well, the courses, energy work, meditation, certifications, retreats, years of it. You are unusually self aware. And so, why does it still feel like it's not you? Like you don't know who you are still? Don't feel comfortable and true in your skin, or the life doesn't feel like it's aligned with who you are. And I ask that question to people who have done more healing work than anyone I know. They're regulated, they're present, and they still sit across from me and say some version of the same thing. I don't know. I don't know. I just was talking to someone today. They said I've been doing this for years. Like, I know this. I know inside all around it, but I don't know why it doesn't feel like me. It still doesn't feel true and authentic. So this is what we're going to talk about today, and you're going to hear it in a way that when I was doing it, I never heard it this way. So stick with it, because this is going to really put a different perspective on this. This isn't that old methodology of let's find out what you want, keep doing it until it happens. Here's what I've come to see. Somewhere along the way, most of us built versions of ourselves that could function, that could perform well, keep people comfortable, keep things moving along, stay safe. I learned how to be very successful in society, but I still felt empty and hollow inside. It got me, and I'm sure it got you through school, through your family, through your job, maybe through things that were genuinely hard to survive. Like, I'm just in awe of what the human brain can go through and then adapt to. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, and that is what I call the conditioned self. And the thing about the conditioned self is it's not loud. It doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like you, feels like who you are. It answers your emails, shows up to your life, makes decisions. It can even meditate. It regulates beautifully because none of it requires it to be seen. It just requires it to function. And that's why regulation can't find it. Because you can calm a nervous system that's running a conditioned self all day long and never once ask whether the self doing the calming is actually yours. Here's where it gets tricky. Once you notice this, once you really start to suspect that the self running your life may not be entirely yours, the instinct is to try and figure out, to fix it, to heal it, to question it, to journal it, to get to the bottom of it. That's what I did for years and years and years. I went down that rabbit hole of fixing and healing and new courses and, retreats. And that's where most people get stuck. That's what got me stuck for years without ever knowing what was going on. Why? Because here's the problem. The thing doing the questioning is the conditioned self. It's an identity that we live in. We don't know that we're in. Okay, this one I'll say really slow, and it still might need you to listen to it a couple more times. We cannot question an identity while we're using the identity to determine who's doing the questioning. Say that again. That's like a mind twister because it really is the purpose of this video. So I want to make sure that you get it. You cannot think your way past a self using the exact mind that self built. It's not about trying hard enough or trying harder. It's not that you need a better technique, another certification. It's that insight alone was never going to reach this because insight is still happening from inside the thing you're trying to see around. Insight is happening from the conditioned self. You're understanding it better, but the patterns keep running. That's why so many people, myself included, was self-aware for so long, regulated, well-read in every framework there is, and still running that same performance. Awareness of a pattern isn't the same as being free of it. It isn't. Awareness alone isn't the same as being free of it. You can watch yourself do the same thing and still not be able to stop doing that thing. And it's so incredibly frustrating because you know you didn't want to do that thing that you just did. Because watching is still what the conditioned self does. So then you say, okay, Donna, so if self-awareness alone can't do it, what can? I'm going to tell you. Here's the distinction. Who are you when you actually see the conditioning? Have you ever even asked that question? We just kind of get into the questioning. We don't, or the conditioning. We don't say, well, who am I if I'm not in the conditioning? Not just feel it, not just be aware something's happening. See the identity of conditioning as an identity. That's what I call the witness. And if you watch my past videos, I talked about it. This all came all together in a recent trip to London. It's the part of you, the witness is the part of you that can recognize a pattern. The part of you that can recognize a pattern has a pattern instead of experiencing it as the truth of who you are. And once you can see the conditioning, you can see the difference. And we're going to really get through this. You can see the identities that you thought you were. And that difference creates this powerful, powerful thing. That difference of who you thought you were. For the longest time, I identified myself as successful, as strong, as independent. The successful was rewarded by being strong and independent because people thought that was leadership. And as long as I was in that identity, then I kept, creating the success. But then the success never filled the hole, never filled the emptiness, never filled this hollow feeling that I've had the majority of my life. So once you have this difference, the powerful thing that it creates is choice. And this is where I want to go back here and look at this. Let me bring this up for you. So conditioning is what I learned to want, right? You learned it. You learned it from the past that this is who I am and this is what I want. The witness can see what I learned. The witness can see the patterns, can see the behaviors, can see the conditioning. And then I have this new thing called the signal. because I believe when we're connected to source, grounded down to Mother Earth, we're in our truth. And in this energy of truth, the past can exist, only the truth. So the signal is what is actually true for me. And the choice is, what do I choose now that I can see the difference? And the power is in this order. You tell the difference, you ask what's true, and then you choose. Seeing the conditioning isn't separate from finding your true self. It's the part of what reveals it. So when you're able to be the witness and see the conditioning, and then actually ask, well, what's true for me? You can see clearly this conditioning, and by seeing this conditioning, you can see what's true for you. So it reveals your truth. And so I want to stop on this signal and pause on it for a moment, because your signal is what's actually true for you. Underneath what you learned to want, what you were praised for, what kept you safe, it's not this new voice that you have to build. It was never gone. It's just been running under the noise of everything you learned to be. And witnessing that condition is what lets it come through. So in my past videos, you saw me draw our true self as this energy, right? This energy, and when we draw an energy, we put a heart in it. And that is energy is connected to above and below. But what happens is that our conditioning comes in, and this is what we think, who we think we are. And it kind of drowns out that true self. It definitely drowns out the signal from above and below to above and below. And we think this is who we are because it has rooms of file cabinets as proof. And everything we see reflects back that truth. And so we think this is who we are. So what I'm saying here is that who you are is really there. You're not creating, you're not trying to become, you're revealing. We're seeing the conditioning and then removing our identification to the conditioning so that we can align with our truth. Here's the deeper freedom, and it's simpler than it sounds. I can see what's arising without automatically becoming it. Because when you actually ask this question, you can see this conditioning, and now you have a choice, and you have a choice that you don't have to automatically become it. Because if you don't get to this point, if you're just up here, it's running unconsciously, it's running automatically, nothing stops it. But we're stopping it here by saying, oh, I can see what I learned. Is it actually true for me? You see, a thought, a fear, an emotion a belief, an old identity, it can show up inside you without you treating it as the truth of who you are. I know it sounds simpler than it is. So this came up with a client, and she had been doing a couple weeks of the work. And so she went into an office and there was an issue. And let's just say that issue didn't resolve in the way that she liked and really that she was proud of. So she leaves the office, she goes home and she's like, oh, I showed up in my conditioning. I responded in my conditioning. The pattern was my conditioning. Everything was the conditioning. And I know that's not who I am. Because we've been getting her aligned to who she is, if she sees the conditioning, she now can spot the conditioning. Now, she could have picked up the phone at that point and called the office and apologized, but no. She got back in her car and she went to the office and she said, I apologize. That was not the way that I wanted to resolve that. And after she apologized, she was able to get the resolution that when she walked out of that office, felt like it aligned with her truth. Right? And that's how this works. She caught it after she got home, but as you continue to go through this, that window gets shorter and shorter, and now you're catching it in the moment. And then once you catch it in the moment over and over again, then now you're no longer catching it. You're just living it. So let me give you a simple example. Say you're about to walk into a moment that matters, a hard conversation, a decision, something you've been avoiding. And the thought comes up, I'm going to mess this up. If you're identified with the conditioning, then there's no separation between that thought and that identity. The I'm going to mess this up becomes I'm not good at difficult situations. I shut down. And that becomes I'm not ready. Like I'm not ready to have this conversation because I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to shut down. I'm going to agree to something that I really don't want to. And then that becomes I shouldn't do this. Right? The thought arrives, and almost instantly you become the person the thought is describing. You can feel it in your body, your focus narrows, your behavior changes, and you shrink, you over-prepare, or you avoid, or maybe you pull out. We all do something different, right? Here's the thing, the conditioning just isn't present at this moment. It's driving everything, and it's driving it unconsciously. Now imagine that same thought arises, but this time there's a witness. And so you get into and you see the conditioning, that thought coming up, saying this is not going to go well. I don't do well in these situations. I don't do well with conflict. And instead of going into the process, you say, interesting. Interesting. The fear is here. There's that old thought again. There's that old conditioning that says the same thing over and over again, that I'm going to mess this up. Now, you haven't suppressed it. You haven't argued with it. You haven't tried to override it with, I'm amazing at this. I can do this. And with the Superman, I can do this. And I'm not saying that I have done that. It has worked in certain occasions. But when you're in the conditioning, you don't think of the Superman thing. You've just simply seen the conditioning. And that right there changes everything. Because now there are two things instead of one. What's arising and the awareness that can see what's arising. And that tiny separation is enormous because it changes the whole sequence. Instead of the trigger and then the conditioning arises, and then we identify with the conditioning, and then we go into the unconscious automatic behavior, right? That's what happens. The trigger, we go into the conditioning, we align with it, and we just go into the behavior that we don't want, but it happens. When we're in that place identified with the condition identity, it's a process that runs. When you're a witness, it becomes you have a trigger, the conditioning still arises, but you can see the conditioning, you witness it. And then there becomes the discernment. That's the discernment is what's actually true for me. And now that I can see the conditioning and what's true for me, what do I choose? What do I choose? You have the ability to do something different. And freedom doesn't mean that the old program never speaks again. Freedom means it no longer automatically drives your behavior, your decisions, or your choices. So if you can't think your way past it, the witness is what does. Not more insight from inside the pattern, but the separation itself. With someone who can reflect it back until you can hold it on your own. And that's the whole reason witnessing exists as its own thing. Separation from therapy, separation from coaching, separate from every regulation practice out there. It's not trying to install something new on top. It's showing you what's already there underneath. So here's how it actually works in practice. First, you're going to recognize a pattern. You name it in your own words. And then you're going to say, is it true? Is this actually true for me? And then now that you can say, is this really true for me? And you can see the conditioning from your truth, because you can see what you learned here. You can see the conditioning. Now you get to choose. The next time that you catch that old identity arising, that fear, that belief that I'm not ready, don't argue with it and don't obey it. Just name it out loud in your own head. That's the conditioning talking, not me. That's the witness doing its work. Then you ask that question. And here's what you might have to do on this question here. What is actually true for me? Because what I find in the beginning is people are so associated, and I was too, we are so associated with what we don't want and what we don't like and who we aren't and who we are and who we think we are, that we don't know. We've never asked this question, what's really true for me? So you might need to sit with that a little bit until you get an honest answer, and then choose from there. And so this might happen after an incident like it did with my client, that she got home and then she thought through it and she's like, nope, that's not true for me. That's not who I feel I am. That's not how I want to resolve this. It's not how I want to show up. And then she made a choice. She went back and fixed it. Well, she went back and resolved it. She aligned it to her truth. She didn't fix it. She aligned it to her truth. And then she could walk out of there in her truth instead of from the conditioning. So you choose from there, not from that old pattern, from the answer. So you're going to recognize it, release your grip on it, ask what's true, and choose. And so here's the thing that remember I started this videos for those of you who have done the work. So if you're with those, yeah, that's me, I've done the work, real work on yourself already, years of it, like myself, then you likely have enough awareness to run this process on your own in real moments as they come up. It's the same sequence from earlier, just lived in instead of watched. The trigger, the conditioning arises, you witness it. I can see what I learned. You have that discernment, what's true for me, and then you make a choice. Remember the old programming, that doesn't mean the old programming stops speaking. It means it stops driving your behavior, your patterns, your choices, your outcomes, your decisions. And then if you do this enough times in enough real moments, something shifts. Not just in the moment, but how you relate to yourself entirely. And it moves something like this. I was the conditioning. I can see the conditioning. I can distinguish it from what is true for me. I can hear my signal of what's really true for me as I see the conditioning, and I choose from my signal instead of my conditioning. And then what happens is your life begins reflecting who you truly are. And that last line is the whole point. You're not a calmer performance of the same life, an actual life that reflects an actual you. And some patterns loosen the first time you do this. Sometimes there's ones there's the rock patterns, and then there's the boulder patterns. And the boulder patterns obviously are bigger and they're, harder to move. You can reach out to me. Go to my website. I have Liberate, which is an individual session on there, or I do have the 12 weeks. And I believe the 12 weeks is what gets you moving along. But, see what works for you, because like I said, you might be able to do this because you've shifted enough of the boulders that you just have these little rocks that you shift that perception, you ask what's true for you, and it's enough for you to make that choice. So once a pattern actually clears, something else happens. You just don't feel lighter. You find out what was actually underneath it the whole time. So you find out who you are that you haven't been able to see. That's the best part, because who you are has not been witnessed. It doesn't have all those file cabinets of proof, but you're going to be building it. You're going to be building it. So you recognize it, you release it, and you step into your truth. And you don't need to arrive at your truth by adding anything. You just finally arrive at it, being able to see what was never covered up to begin with, or what was covered up to begin with. So it was just covered up with this person that you thought you were. And then the part you don't expect, you're able to be your own witness. Your own witness, that you can see your conditioning from your truth so that you can live in your truth. if this resonated with you, if there was parts of this that you were like, oh yeah, that really made sense, or try it and see what happens, drop a comment below. I would love if you were to subscribe to the channel or give me a like. That would be fantastic. And we're going to continue on this. This is my mission, to bring as many women, many people back to their truth, living from their signal, so that they can witness who they aren't and make a choice for who they are and live in that. It was an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.